to make it to the global finals. But for Felipe, Silva, and Sebastian, Solari, Legua, I think making it through is going to be preferred if you could stay in the winner's bracket. We did just get to watch Sebastian play. We're looking at it from his perspective now, but as a quick reminder, we're taking a look at his team of Landorus, that very, very impactful Galarian Moltres, Grimmsnarl, Spectrier, Regieleki, and the Registeel, which has been popular all over. And there's some very similar matchups going on here, I think, as we saw in the winners round 1.
Oh, definitely. Felipe Silva. There's a lot of Pokemon that we've seen today. One that we actually haven't, but we are getting to witness that Registeel again with that Grimmsnarl, Venusaur Torkoal that we got to witness last round, a Landorus. But all of this team rounded off with a Porygon 2. So Felipe here looking to make a good run with this team and get some accomplishments on the board with this Players' Cup 4 run.
That's something that may be impactful if he wants to play the game a little bit slower, set up an end game win con with something like that Torkoal. Felipe has the option, a newer player on the scene, but said it once and I'll say it again, Players' Cup is the kind of place you can make a name for yourself. We've got time to practice, there's a whole lot of Pokemon to get played, and taking down somebody like Sebastian would be a really, really good step for him when it comes to trying to truck on through and make his way through on the winner's side.
Yeah, being able to compete from home has definitely brought out a whole new batch of players that we wouldn't really get to see. So being able to see all of this talent and being able to see what they bring to the competition is so exciting. So let's get into this match, Felipe and Sebastian, and see how this winner's quarters is going to be faring. So to start, Grimmsnarl and Landorus. Grimmsnarl, definitely, we saw how much work put in the last game with screens and stuff, and that is why Sebastian's going to be starting with it himself next to this Spectre.
Both trainers knowing how important Grimmsnarl can be in setting up those early impactful screens, or maybe just buying a little bit of time, slowing things down with the Thunder Wave. It has such a fantastic move pool, and in this game the Grimmsnarl doesn't have to worry about the Psychic Terrain either, so both trainers a little bit freer to do exactly what they want with their Grimmsnarl when it comes to setting up early game screens or slows that it might want to play around.
Oh, definitely, and screens can go such a long ways. This Spectre, though, taking the opportunity to be switching out into Sebastian's own Landorus, wanting to match Felipe on the other end there, and getting that nice Intimidate off onto Felipe's Landorus as well. Grimmsnarl just going for the Protect, seeing the pressure this Landorus can offer on the other end, and just wanting to slow it down as much as possible. Felipe, a different idea, going with a Taunt, but I don't think Landorus is going to mind it too much, but it does mean that Sebastian can't be going for those Sword Stamps that we saw oh so often in last game.
Nah, that's something he's not able to do. No protecting either, so this Landorus really has to go for it. But that taunt, a little bit wasted there. It would have been much preferred into that highly supportive Spectrier, but not being given that option. Porygon Z coming in after Porygon 2, my apologies, switching in after the Landorus switches out with the U-turn and gets a little bit of damage down. So very supportive Pokemon now on Felipe's side, kind of the mirror of last turn where Sebastian had the two supportive Pokemon at the beginning of the turn.
Yeah, definitely a Porygon 2, the cuter of the two options, and Torkoal is going to be coming out as well, switching in for the Grimmsnarl, so two Pokemon that can definitely capitalize off of a potential Trick Room situation here. So what we saw in the last games with the speed control setting up the air screens could be a very different vibe here. Sebastian going for a Thunder Wave into the Porygon 2, and just looking to pivot out with a U-turn, get a little bit of chip damage into the Torkoal to start bringing something else in, and eyeing up that Spectre right off the bat. No Grimmsnarl on Felipe's side means that it can't get taunted, it can't really slow it down, and Porygon 2 looking to really actually slow things down and gets the opportunity to set up that Trick Room.
I think Sebastian was banking on a Thunder Wave paralysis turn there, and then being able to taunt it with the Spectre in the following turn. The Spectre is still going to be able to put in a little bit of work. The Snarls will be able to reduce the damage dealt by the Porygon 2 and the Torkoal. But now you've got a Torkoal coming in, it's set up the sun. There's no easy way for Sebastian to change that one up right now. And this Torkoal could just start trying to sweep on through, taking advantage of everything. The Grimmsnarl has something to say about that though.
Light screen to just try and slow down this Torkoal as much as possible, as it's going for an Eruption, dealing a really considerable amount of damage regardless, thanks to the Sun. And Porygon 2 going for an Ice Beam, not doing as much, but a little bit of chip always helps. Spectre, though, given the opportunity to stick around thanks to that late screen, does get a Snarl to start lowering the special attack on both of these two Pokemon.
Lowering the special attacks is important, and getting chip damage down on the Torkoal is big too. Any little bit of damage reducing the power of the Eruption, really quite important. So making sure that Torkoal can't just go crazy with Eruptions every single turn, and being smart here, the Torkoal nicely saving itself from a little Thunder Wave there.
Yeah, it's definitely not wanting to take that Thunder Wave, and the Porygon 2 just going for an Ice Beam into that slot. Another Snarl from Spectre here, just that slow chip on the Porygon 2, and another special attack drop, which it definitely does not appreciate.
Yeah, the Porygon 2 doing very little damage now, but the Torkoal managing to avoid that Snarl and the Thunder Wave, so feeling pretty good about its chances in this one. I think the Torkoal may have to pivot over to something like the Heat Wave if it's taken too much damage, and just try and play it through that way. But for now, the Grimmsnarl is still very focused on making sure that it isn't potentially not able to move at all.
Yeah, any way to be slowing these Pokemon down is appreciated, but not slowing this Torkoal down. Does go for an Eruption, but took enough damage combined with that special attack drop, not picking the KO on either, and it making it so Porygon 2 had to finish it off. So at least the Spectre is taken care of, can't continue going for Snarls. Grimmsnarl gets to stick around, but at this point, everything on the field is paralyzed.
There's a whole lot of paralysis going on, but Trick Room's still in play, and this Trick Room could be pretty impactful. There's only one more turn of it, but I don't know if there's an immediate answer to deal with the Porygon 2. The Porygon 2 could just take this turn, throw out a little bit of damage, maybe even try and like weave in something a little bit different, and then if it's left alone for too long, it might just be able to try and set up another Trick Room in the following turn. So Porygon is leaving the field, letting that Grimmsnarl come in. Could be a bit of a mix-up, and this Torkoal, will still be able to capitalize on this last turn of Trick Room.
Well, especially switching the Porygon 2 out gives it the opportunity to stay safe and to get that special attack reset. The Moltres, though, went for a Protect, stay safe. Grimmsnarl, not as fortunate, and is going to be taken down on this last turn of Trick Room and the last turn of Sun.
Yeah, those Eruptions have been really powerful, even after the chip, even after the extra damage from the special attack drop from the Snarl. Really, really tough. I do think Sebastian's put himself in a better position here, though. Just looking at the board and saying, okay, I've made it through Trick Room. Now I've got this power duo that he's been able to play with so many times, and just put himself in a really good position to once again try and wrap up a game with Moltres and Landorus.
Yeah, these two Pokemon are so strong, but there's still so many Pokemon on Felipe's end that Sebastian has to get through. And Porygon 2 being one of them, hitting the field again for its friend Torkoal. Unfortunately, no special attack boost from the download, but can't always be so fortunate. Sebastian looking to make the first move here and start putting some pressure on with this Dynamax, opting to go for that Dynamax Moltres.
Dynamax Moltres has been very impactful in games that we've seen and in previous Players' Cups as well, so looking to kind of try and tidy up the game that way and see how he can do playing that. Grimmsnarl, though, doing what it does best, throwing out those screens, trying to keep safe from this Dynamax Moltres.
Definitely trying to slow this Moltres down in any way that he can, and thanks to that light screen, sits pretty comfortably after the Airstream. And as much as all the Airstream boosts are nice, if this Porygon 2 is given the opportunity to set up another Trick Room in later on, might not matter, but meantime, does have to weather the hit from that Landorus, does get a critical hit, but Porygon 2 being so bulky takes it pretty well.
Porygon 2 in a fine position here to try and set up a Trick Room. It's now behind two screens, so it's going to be taking reduced damage from both of them, and that Trick Room really causing problems after those Airstreams, which Sebastian just keeps on going for.
Yeah, Airstream into the Grimmsnarl here. I mean, both of these Pokemon are going super speedy, but I can't imagine there isn't a Trick Room coming out here. But the Rock Slide potentially could could change the mind, and sure enough, the flinch on the Porygon 2, it doesn't pick up the KO on the Grimmsnarl, but it does keep the looming threat of Trick Room out on the horizon.
And this Porygon probably feels like it can take at least another turn to try and grab a Trick Room. It didn't take much damage in that last turn at all. Sebastian very, very focused on this Grimmsnarl and being able to deal with it that way. This will be the final turn of Moltres' Dynamax too, and it's really been struggling to land all of that damage. Mixing it up from Max Airstreams though, going for even more. And look how well Porygon takes that.
I mean, Porygon 2, an absolute force to be reckoned with. It can be such a supportive Pokemon, just being able to tank hits repeatedly with Evilite. And I mean, there's another one. The Rock Slide is going to clean up the KO on the Grimmsnarl, but Porygon 2 sticking around, nice and healthy, no flinch this time around. It is inevitable. The Trick Room is coming out.
Well, this means that for the next 5 turns, Felipe is just going to be absolutely in the driving seat. That's the second Trick Room of the game you really like to see it, and even the Landorus is going to be able to take advantage of it. Both of the Pokemon on the field have speed boosts, so the Landorus, the Porygon, and the Torkoal are all going to be much, much slower than their counterparts on the other side. This is the last 2 that Sebastian has, and while they can usually sweep through a game after a couple of speed boosts, I don't know if they're going to be allowed the time to do it as well. The Landorus has now taken an attack drop from the Intimidate 2, so Sebastian really needs to find a way to work through these turns of Trick Room and get to the other side of it, I think, to find the win. And to make that even harder, Felipe hasn't used Dynamax until now.
Definitely a tricky situation for Sebastian here, having to hit through all the screens, and with a fully healthy Max Landorus as well to try and have to deal with. This Landorus is being given the opportunity to kind of do what it wants here, and Sebastian, yes, he has all the speed, but that's just a huge disadvantage in Trick Room. And this Porygon 2, I mean, it does still get the coverage of Ice Beam, and Landorus doesn't appreciate that at all. And Felipe's Landorus following up with a Rock Ball, Moltres being taken down, and Felipe just having all the power going into this endgame.
And saving that Dynamax until your opponent's is done means you can get knockouts that you wouldn't. If that was Moltres in its Dynamax form, probably would have been a whole lot more. I mean, it would have just had more health. It would have been harder to deal with. And now that light screen's gone, I mean, this Landorus is going to get felled by the follow-up Ice Beam from this Porygon 2. So Sebastian seeing exactly what's coming. He got caught out by the Trick Room. He struggled with it the first time it came onto the board. Really didn't get to play much during it. Did get through it, but then was in a tough position, was down to 2 Pokemon, and then the second Trick Room finally going up from the Porygon 2 after a couple of flinches. Just secured the game, and that's kind of the first time I think we've seen this Max Airstream strategy just be exposed by Trick Room, at least today. Yeah,
the whole game of today has been Max Airstreaming and capitalizing off of all of those speed boosts, and Felipe being the first person to be like, no, let's wait a second. I'm not having you do this to me, setting up that Trick Room, and the fact that there wasn't a way for Sebastian to be stopping it either. I mean, he did what he could, put the Thunder Wave onto it, got a Rock Slide flinch, did everything he could, waited out the first Trick Room, but I mean, Porygon 2 just being such a pest out on the field, switching in and out, and just having the opportunity to set another one up, really kind of just spelled disaster for Sebastian here, so he really has to respect that going into this game too.
Oh, definitely, and I think that's something that he's going to have to look in the team and see where the options are and see what answer he has to something like the Porygon 2. We know about the Spectrier with Taunt, but that Spectrier was put in an awkward position early on, I think, so definitely going to have to dig for options, and if the Trick Room goes up once, maybe twice, definitely if it goes up twice again, it could spell a bit of a disaster for Sebastian in this one. But Felipe, with a nice adaptation, a good read on the meta, I think, to understand how many teams rely on Max Airstream, and just to have that option. That was Torkoal once again, without Venusaur, putting in work. So Torkoal really on a mission to shut me up today.
Well, it's time to head into Game 2, aka how to stop this Porygon 2 and Trick Room. So Grimmsnarl, Landorus coming out from Felipe. I mean, if it worked the first time around, works the second, but pairing off against the Landorus and Grimmsnarl from Sebastian.
Yep, both trainers acknowledging that this is a very, very good lead, you know, that you can buy a little bit of time with the Grimmsnarls. You can try and exchange Intimidates with your Landorus. I think both trainers are going to have to dig to try and see what they can do to find an advantage, because otherwise we could just have mirrored turns going through this. And looking at Sebastian's menu choice, something he does a lot with his Landorus is switch it out and let it come back in.
Well, neither of these Landorus's are taking the opportunity to switch out. Felipe going for a Rock Slide, connects with both and gets the flinch on Sebastian's Landorus as well, but not on the Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl normally setting things up, going for a Spirit Break. Both of them with the same idea, though. These were identical turns. Both of the Rock Slides, both of the Spirit Breaks, both of them just trying to take out the opposing player's Grimmsnarl as soon as they can.
Both trainers very much on the same page here, and I think one of them's going to have to kind of pivot and try and mix. Now the Grimmsnarls are doing a little bit more of what we expect.
Felipe taking the opportunity to set up the Reflect, and Landorus fire off with a Rock Slide. Sebastian with a U-turn into Grimmsnarl on Felipe's end, looking to just go for a little bit of a pivot here, and we do get the opportunity to see what he has in the back. Same as last time, we have that Spectre, a little more protected this time around, not being put out in the awkward position like the first game, as well as the Moltres. Grimmsnarl just looking to try and get some more damage off on Felipe's Grimmsnarl, but not able to pick up the KO thanks to their Reflect.
Reflect really, really impactful here, and Felipe getting that up first, meaning he really was able to take those hits very comfortably during that turn. So I think Sebastian will have to look at it and say, oh, okay, I probably need a Reflect of my own at some point. But without that Grimmsnarl setting that up, it's kind of behind the pace of getting these up. And while that Grimmsnarl does that, Felipe is able to push on and set up a light screen, then maybe start throwing out some more Spirit Breaks if it wants to lower those stats. So I think Felipe just a little bit ahead after that first turn exact mirror that they played out.
And Felipe as well taking the opportunity to go for a taunt onto the Spectre, but not going to matter for this turn. Instead, it's firing off a Shadow Ball into Felipe's Landorus, getting that special defense drop 2 boost. Not that it's going to matter, as it just fires off a U-turn. Unable to pick up the KO, though, which means Sebastian will have one more opportunity to try and take down the Grimmsnarl on Felipe's end. And here it is, Porygon 2, my favorite, re-entering the fields here. It was such a force to be reckoned with the first game, and it's back for more.
Porygon 2's got to be feeling really good, though, because it's come in against that Spectre, which could potentially cause it a number of problems. That Spectre took a taunt for its troubles from the Grimmsnarl, so there is going to be a lot of switching required to make sure that this Porygon 2 is stopped from setting up Trick Room the classic way of just taunting it. You know it doesn't carry the Mental Herb, it has to carry the Eviolite, and taunt is a good way to at least try and buy some time, but taunt on the Spectre, not an option right now. Is going to have to look at the Snarls. And with Taunt on the Spectre, we know that the Grimmsnarl doesn't have access to the Taunt, so I don't see a world where this Porygon isn't allowed to set up a Trick Room if it wants.
At least it could be slowed down in different ways. Grimmsnarl going for a light screen, Snarl as well from the Spectre. So a way to stop the special attack as well as lower the special attack on the Porygon 2. And I mean, we haven't seen Felipe's last Pokemon, but we might get the opportunity to now with that Landorus going for a U-turn to just clean up Sebastian's Grimmsnarl here. And I mean, with the threat of Trick Room on the horizon, I'm sure we can imagine what this fourth and final Pokemon is going to be. And sure enough, it is that Torkoal looking to capitalize off of what is surely about to be a Trick Room.
The Trick Room immediately dropped from the Porygon 2. Of course, the Snarl not connecting there with the Torkoal. The Torkoal gets in absolutely scot-free. So this is a really, really good position for the Torkoal, feeling pretty good, I'd imagine, about its place on the board right now. The Porygon given a few options as well, and there's the Moltres from Sebastian. They can't start playing it with this max airstream method that has been played so many times before.
Of course, the Spectre just looking to try and slow it down. It'll just be how you can slow it down these two Pokemon that just love this Trick Room and love being able to capitalize off of the lack of speed. Sebastian, though, trying to slow it down even more with a Max Moltres to deal it some good damage.
Max Moltres is going to be something that I think Sebastian's looking towards as the win condition for him here. Just nice and bulky, able to take a hit or maybe even two, activate the Berserk ability, and then sweep. That said, it would be so much easier for this Moltres if it wasn't in the Trick Room. The Eruption doing a monstrous amount of damage.
Porygon 2 looking to follow it up, but unfortunately not dealing nearly as much, certainly not appreciating this earlier Snarl, and the Torkoal is going to take a massive Max Darkness from this Galarian Moltres, and a further special defense drop to boot. And Spectre, sure, normally fast, having to act last in this case, but it's going to get a big Snarl off, combined with that special defense drop, and drops her special attack. The Torkoal just holds on, but it's not really going to be able to capitalize too much more off this turn.
I think this Torkoal is going to need to land like one more big heat wave and try and like at least deal with the Spectre. You're not going to be able to deal with the Moltres, but get as much damage down on it as you possibly can and try and go with that. Actually, taking a look over at Felipe's team, he doesn't have access to Heat Wave on this Torkoal. Only the Eruption, which is now going to be very, very weak, and the Burning Jealousy for its Fire-type move. So, limited option from Felipe may explain some of his more defensive plays around this particular Torkoal.
And speaking of defensive plays, opting for that Protect, but it's still going to be taking this Max Darkness through the Protect here, and the Porygon 2 just not really doing any damage. So this Torkoal goes down, this Porygon 2 not really doing much on the field, and really is not going to do much more either, as another Snarl from Spectre connects and just drops the special attack, which is already pitiful, down to nothing.
Yes, Snarls are also doing more damage because those special defense drops from the Moltres and its Max Darkness have really been helping out and putting in a good old shift to try and deal with it. So a lot of, changes to stats, making things a little bit easier for Sebastian. His Spectre is exceptionally low, but his Moltres is still very, very healthy, and potentially, if it's able to get to the other side of the Trick Room, able to tidy up. The Max Darkness into the Porygon 2 could just deal with it right away, and I think Felipe's down to us in a slightly tricky position here. Doesn't usually want to play in the Trick Room, but it's probably a little bit slower if that's an option.
Yeah, last game it worked out so well because Sebastian already had all of those max Airstream boosts, and is just going to take the opportunity as well to be swapping that Spectre out into the Landorus to drop the regular attack down more. So Felipe, back a little bit against the wall, is going to finally go for that Dynamax. This -1 Landorus. Dynamax is having to put in some work now.
I think the Dynamax Landorus is a really smart play, just because it's going to be able to potentially take a hit a little bit easier. It's not a full health, but it's doing a little bit better. Porygon knows it has to buy some time for itself here, and that's really smart. But being able to access the max moves could be the turning point for Felipe.
Felipe starting it off with a Max Letter These into the Landorus, doing almost negative damage, but it is going to be getting the special attack drop onto that Moltres to try and slow it down a little bit here, as it looks to speed right back up, firing a Max Airstream into the Porygon. I mean, Porygon 2 is so bulky, it takes that pretty well, but Sebastian just looking to get that speed on his end for when this Trick Room inevitably ends.
Getting that Max Flutterby definitely makes this Moltres a little bit more manageable. If it does get the Berserk boost by dropping under half of its health, then it would be in a position where it's just back to neutral. So I think while it's a low damage attack, being able to control the Moltres a little bit better that way, certainly something that could be impactful over the rest of the game, as this Porygon is just going to start trying to annoy Sebastian by staying on the field. There's no more max moves to get through. Even with its drops to its stats, it's going to be trying to buy a little bit of time here.
Of course, I mean, Porygon 2 is so difficult to break through, and this Landorus is slowly but surely trying to break through Sebastian's team here. Firing off a Max Airstream as well into the Moltres. Does bring it down to under half his health though, so there is going to be that Berserk boost, but it's not as devastating as it could have been if there wasn't that Max Letter B the last turn. Landorus, U-turning out, Intimidate Cyclade. Pretty big here considering Felipe can't switch anything else, so Spectre rejoining the field.
This is going to be probably a pretty tough situation, for the end of this turn. If you look at where kind of the board is changing to, there was a Max Airstream landed just before that Trick Room ended. So that Max Airstream is now in play, and as you can see from Sebastian's side, he's going in and checking all of these changes, because there's been so many changes through the Dynamax turns that he wants to be careful. And this Landorus could be in a great position now to just be able to turn around and say, you know what, I'll be getting the Airstream boost afterwards while you're wasting time trying to deal with my Porygon.
Of course, and the Landorus just looking to go for that Rock Fall. Goes into the Spectre instead though. The Moltres staying safe, but the Spectre unfortunately is going to be going down here. I like how we got a little peek into the Porygon 2 stat. -2 special, special defense, -3 special attack, but it's still proving to be as much of a menace as it can be as it goes for yet another Trick Room.
It's setting up the Trick Room mainly for itself. Obviously, the speed on the Moltres and Landorus both boosted by the Airstream. So kind of just saying, well, you know what? I know you've got Landorus in the back, and I know that you may have lowered my special defense and my special attack a little bit, but I still want to hit you with a big, powerful Ice Beam. So really kind of putting a lot, I think, on the Porygon here to try and clean this one up. The Ice Beam, going to be able to hit both of the Pokemon over on Sebastian's side super effectively. So that could just be the way for him to try and tidy up this game.
Of course, and yeah, the Porygon 2 isn't really hitting for too much with the drops, but the super effective, as well as the fact it's just not going down with these recovers, is so impactful. And even more impactful, a freeze onto this Moltres. And a weakness policy, which it's not, unless it thaws, isn't going to get the opportunity to capitalize off of here. Yeah,
this is a bad time for the Moltres. It's stuck frozen in the air. It wasn't even given the opportunity to move. That Trick Room was so good, but it was pretty entertaining to see as it just stuck there hovering. So the Moltres, really caught out there, and really smart targeting by Felipe to call that one as the issue and say, you know what, that's the one I'm going to make sure I double target. And now it's just Landorus against a Pokemon that has Ice Beam and an opposing Landorus.
Yeah, Porygon 2 showing that you don't need a special attack to be putting an impact, and is just going to keep recovering. And it had all the special defense drops, but its defense is still perfectly healthy, which isn't even really going to matter at this point, since Sebastian can't connect the Rock Slide with it either. So this Porygon 2, pretty healthy, will have the opportunity to start bringing this Landorus down, and with Light Screen ending.
This is a really good turn for Porygon, and this is why a lot of people love Porygon. It does set up a number of times, I've seen it so many times over the years, these really tough endgame situations where you just don't have enough damage and the Porygon can just wear you down, especially if the Porygon has a super effective hit in its arsenal. Not enough thanks to those earlier snarls, but Landorus I think is going to struggle a little bit here to find that time, and I don't think Fly is going to be enough to take down this Porygon.
This Porygon 2 has just been so much of a liability for Sebastian to have out on the field, and did everything to slow it down, but unfortunately Porygon 2 just can't be stopped. One of my favorites is going to just take the chance for recover. I mean, it can't hit the Landorus this turn. Why not make sure that all of this damage that Landorus is dealing to it is just going to be healed right back up? So Trick Room is ending this turn, but if this Landorus can't do enough, it's not really going to matter.
At some point, the Landorus will have to be on the field at the same time as the Porygon, and it will have to face the music. There's no way that it can just hide and wear this Porygon 2 down, especially while it's throwing out these recovers. The Rock Slide missing just seals up the game. It's time, Landorus. Your Ice Beam is here, and you will be felled by the brave Porygon 2.
Sebastian just wanting to try and maybe get those flinches to try and do something against the Porygon, but unable to connect, which means